Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm doing something completely new this time, and I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to tell you a story from the tree fort up here because my neighbors are doing construction and it's super loud at my house. All right, let's climb up there. All right, we're up in the tree now and it's time to tell you a story. I want to tell you all about my dream trip and how I made it happen with like very little money and very little sponsors. And I got other people to support everything and made it happen, and it was a win-win scenario for everyone. Pretty cool story. It's one of my favorite trips of all time. It was in Cappadocia, Turkey. And I want to tell you the backstory from the very start of how it came together. I hope this inspires you to like get creative and make things happen on your own, because yeah, it was really amazing for me. Okay, so let's take it back to 2017. I had a fellow by the name of Emre reach out to me, and Emre was a local downhiller in Turkey, and he was a very passionate trail builder, and he had been following some of my trail building and some of my riding, and he was a builder at the Kayseri bike park, or Erciyes bike park in Kayseri in Turkey. And he said, man, I would love to get your help building trails, and I would love your advice, and maybe we can pay for you to come here if you help with the trails. So it just sparked with like a simple conversation like that. And then immediately I started researching the area, and I learned about Cappadocia and these crazy, amazing sandstone formations, and like just the rich history and culture of Cappadocia. Like the fact that like this is where the Christians went to hide from the Romans in the Roman era, and they like hid in caves, and they had all these cool paintings, and it was such a unique place in terms of like world history to visit and also ride, because the natural terrain looked absolutely unbelievable to shred. So I was like, okay, I have to go to Erciyes bike park, and then I have to spend some time in Cappadocia after. And I have to make this a media trip too. I can't just make it about going there and digging. Like I have to really capitalize on this opportunity. So I told him about what I wanted to do. He was totally on board. We just Facebook messaged for like a couple months back and forth, planning more and more things. It was really cool. And then I decided it was time to assemble my dream team. I got to the point where the local government that was funding the bike park was able to pay for our flights there. And then Emre was able to help hook us up with a lodge that would cover our meals. So our ground costs were pretty much nothing, and we could go there and make this work. But the only problem was I didn't have a sponsor that had the budget to pay for a video. So I started reaching out to local filmmakers around like the Vancouver Island and Vancouver area. And that's when I reconnected with Max Berkowitz, because he was filming for a company called We Are One Composites, which make carbon wheels handmade here in British Columbia. Really cool company. I wasn't riding for them yet, but this opportunity sparked up the conversation, and then I was able to get sponsored by them, get a set of wheels, and Max was able to come join my crew on the trip to Turkey. So I had Max as the filmmaker, and then it was time to assemble the rest of the team. I really wanted someone I could have a ton of fun with on the trip, and I wasn't so much more concerned about like what am I going to get the most media out of. I go off vibes, and I really wanted to have a fun crew and some like really like amazing lifelong experiences in the trip of a lifetime. So the first person that came to mind was my buddy Mason Michon, because he is honestly one of the most fun dudes I know, and he knows how to have a good time. I knew like following him down the trail would make amazing GoPro footage because his style is so sick. And he likes to take photos too, but he wasn't there for photos. He was just there for a good time and to shred with me. So Mason was on board right away. I had been already showing him the region and like some of the potential lines we could ride, and he was fired up. And then it was time to get a photographer, but I was down to crunch time. There was like less than a week to go before we were flying out there. We had one extra ticket for someone. So I called up my buddy Bruno Long, and I felt a little guilty because I knew there was no money involved. It was just like a fun trip with like no money for anybody except for Max, because he was shooting for We Are One Components and they had money for the video. So at that point, Bruno was like, let me think about it. That sounds really cool. Then he did some research on Cappadocia, and his mind was blown too. Within the hour, he phoned me back and he's like, dude, sometimes you just got to say yes. And like, I'll never forget the enthusiasm in his voice over the call that time. I was like, yes, man, you're in. And I was over the moon because like Bruno is a photographer I've admired for a long time. I had the opportunity to shoot with him a couple years before that, and his shots were super good. He has multiple bike mag publications and covers, and he's like such a rad dude to hang out with too, like such a fun guy. And I was like, man, this is gonna be awesome. I have Bruno, I have Mason, I have Max. We're gonna do some really amazing stuff together. And yeah, less than a week later, we all met in the Vancouver airport and we were off. We got to Turkey and it was unbelievable. Emre was such a nice dude. He was a crazy driver though, like we were pretty scared the first time. We jumped in the car with him and drove up to the resort. We got up to the ski resort and we saw a bike park that was really struggling because it was one guy trying to build trails that knew what he was doing and a bunch of trail builders with no knowledge of the sport, because funnily enough, this was during the crisis in Syria and a lot of people were flooding into this region of Turkey from Syria. And I guess the bike park was trying to save money because, I mean, it's a really hard thing to fund in the summer in the first place, but in a country like Turkey, bike parks are extra hard to fund. So they had like Syrian refugees working for, I'm guessing, quite cheap. And they had no idea about how to build bike trails. So we kind of like showed people how to make a jump and we were educating them on trail building. And it was a very like fulfilling experience and really eye-opening. It gave me a whole new perspective on that situation in that part of the world. And it was like just one of those travel experiences that really opens your eyes. And we just thought it was amazing being out there and riding and having a good time. But honestly, the downhill trail wasn't that great. We made it as good as we could, but then we knew it was time to get out to the place we had really been there for, and that was Cappadocia. Emre was totally on board. His arm was a little injured, so he couldn't ride with us, but he was such a legend. Like, this guy drove us around to all the zones, showed us what he knew, hooked us up with a local friend of his, and we just went around and we like ripped all these lines. We got up at like 3 a.m. a couple times so we could get out to sunrise for like 5 a.m. to some certain ridges to try to catch the hot air balloons rising at sunrise. We went in the hot air balloons one morning. We ended up getting the cover of the Bike Magazine photo annual the next year with us hiking our bikes up on our backs up with the air balloons rising. It was just so amazing. It was my first cover shot, my first experience doing such a crazy thing on the other side of the world. And it was so much fun. Like, everyone was so motivated and having a great time. And yeah, it was unbelievable. And the culture we were surrounded in, the landscapes we were surrounded in, the natural terrain was just like, and like the smells of the place, like it's so hard to describe how amazing this was. I couldn't believe it. Like, it's a trip I'll never forget. So clean. Let's keep going. Oh yeah. It's really the people that make the trip, and our crew was just phenomenal. So that was awesome. When we got home, it's funny, Max was like a pretty unreliable 20-year-old kid at the time, and he lost the hard drive. So I was gutted. It was like 6 months without any content coming out, and it was almost 2018. I had just signed with Marin Bikes. I wasn't even on the same bike anymore, and this video had to come out. But it finally dropped, and then I made things happen. Like, we needed a really good song, but We Are One components did not have money for a new song. So I ended up paying out of pocket myself like almost $1,000 to get an Odesza track we could use. And it's also the reason why I haven't monetized this video. It's because Odesza would not allow us to monetize. We could use the song but not monetize, but it still costs that much money to use for just that video. So that was crazy. And yeah, so I was like out of pocket a little bit, but man, that trip was unbelievable. And just like, I was able to have this really amazing resume for myself showing how I could make something come to life at zero cost to my sponsors. And yeah, that was a lot of fun, and I still like think about that trip all the time. It's so good. This is the video right here that Max made. It doesn't show a lot of the cultural elements of the trip. It is just a quick 2-minute shred it in the desert in Cappadocia. So sick. Okay, let's check it out.